Hi everyone, this is your host Lindsey Elocin Hooper coming to you live with once again the amazing Ben Davis. All right, and we are continuing this from the podcast we were listening to earlier. Just an update on the what can happen with mind control, implants, etc. Even into the matrix as far as technical difficulties that can happen, who to blame, who not to blame, etc. So let's get right into it, Ben.
Okay, well, it's basically coming from a mind control recovery when people started coming out with the gang stalking and targeted individuals, a TI. And so MC is called mind control. And this speaker is definitely MIT, and this is what he has to say.
I'm going to start this series with the topic of disinformation. That's the deliberate sharing of misleading or inaccurate information. Disinformation hurts the general public in ways they don't understand, or that are not obvious to them, typically through divide and conquer tactics. It helps a lot with the left-right divide and shaping a Hegelian dialectic. These are tactics that are very familiar to the truth movement. I don't really need to go into them. It's a topic I could go into on a future program, but not today. Today, I'm going to be talking about how it affects targets, because it does hurt them directly. One of the reasons should be obvious, because of what targets are accused of. They're accused of being delusional, lying, being stupid, being paranoid, reading too much into everyday occurrences. Guess what? The disinformation directed at targets looks very much like what they're accused of. When you, as a target, propagate disinformation, you are in effect hurting yourself. It's bad public relations, it's bad for your reputation, and when your public image is destroyed on top of everything else, you've got nothing.
Right.
Another way in which disinformation hurts you is the actions you take because of your misconceptions, which are a result of disinformation. Like if you believe that you're in imminent danger of being killed. If you make a commitment based on what you think is happening, and that turns out to be wrong, that can have a major detrimental impact on your life.
Right there was where my incident at Fort Polk story 40 years ago was when I published this book, and when it comes out that I'm supposed to get assassinated. Well, after researching all this stuff and really doing some brain thinking here, this guy's got it right on the money. And here's the rest of the story.
They're inventing disinformation at very low cost to them. You act on it and destroy your life. A very big cost to you. In short, for targets, disinformation kills. So, why does it spread? Why do targets spread information around without thinking about whether it's true or not? Well, it's because they want it to be true. Disinformation reflects what you want.
That is where the flat earthers, the Nibiru, Planet X believers are. And I have some very close, very reliable sources that were in DARPA and that have studied Stitchin's, 12th planet and all that stuff since 1976, right. And they still tell me it's 700 years away. So here
exactly.
we go.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
And it's just like we're seeing in the political process. Yeah. All of these people are like at each other. And now, you know what? I think Trump won the nomination and the election because of his son, Eric, planned it. They planned it. And it's just like a perfect design of what we're fixing to go through.
Well, perhaps, but yeah. I'm still going to stick to the timeline of Andy 2016. I'm not backing down. Call me crazy.
I'm not backing down.
I do see him eventually being president.
I didn't want to bring that in yet because I introduced Andy a year ago, June 24th, on the L&M show.
Right.
And I introduced him as my president because I was in the Army in the future, and he sent me back in time. That's already been recorded. But we'll get into that later. Here we go.
Yeah.
What targets want, most of all, is vindication. They want the perpetrators to acknowledge what they've done. A close second, public acceptance of their stories. Related, you want validation of your personal story. There are many reasons disinformation gets spread around, but you'll find it's rooted in these three basic wants that TIs have. Related to people forwarding lies because they like the lies, well, they like the lies more than the truth. The truth is less pleasant than the lie. So when you confront disinformation, you're going to be coming face to face with some unpleasant truths. You're not going to like them. But confronting the truth is less unpleasant than continuing to be targeted.
Right there. I want to hear what your comment, what he just said. Made any sense?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. That whole end of the spectrum, in my opinion, it goes back to the fact that, all of this different disinformation can essentially be used as information to kind of get you back on the right track. Now, I know he wasn't specifically, that was one part of what he was saying, but he was also saying it as...
to confuse you.
Exactly.
And that's what the whole point of this program
is. And to how to be, and that's what I always tell people, and within my practice, Sacred Garden of Light, learn how to be discerning and how to filter your thoughts and be aware of what you're hearing.
You have to recognize it when it happens.
Exactly.
All right, here we go.
So let's proceed with confronting those truths. One unpleasant truth is that things TIs say aren't necessarily completely true. The way I think of it is like this. There's what's really happening to the TI, there's what the TI sees happening, what the TI thinks is happening, and what the TI tells others is happening. And those can be four very different things. Starting at the beginning, the falsehoods TIs repeat are rooted in being misled. And that's okay. Being wrong is okay.
Yes.
You're being deliberately misled, and you can't be expected to bat 1,000, even under normal circumstances. Being wrong is not a permanent condition. There's nothing wrong with you for being wrong. Related, targets will often be reticent with certain details of their targeting which might shed light on what's really happening in their case. They're reticent because they would have to disclose some embarrassing information. And this is understandable too. The tactics are built around personal details or topics TIs would rather not discuss, and this is done on purpose. Harder to explain is when you lie about details of your targeting to cover holes in your testimony. And I do see that happening in conference calls and even in person. People don't want to admit they're wrong. Confronting the possibility that you're wrong is one of those unpleasant truths. A common example, the voices in your head feed you information and you repeat it. People ask you where you got that information, and rather than admit you're getting it from the least trustworthy people in the world, you'll say you don't remember where you got it, or you got it off the internet. You'll say you heard it somewhere. Maybe you'll even rationalize it. That is the source for what I guess is a culture of disinformation that has taken root in the conference calls or on some TI websites.
Yeah.
So, what he's really specifically saying there is the disinformation is being circuited. Here we go with Facebook, YouTube. Everybody's copying each other. You got the flat earthers, and you got all the asteroid stuff, and NASA, and they're all photoshopped. And I got a guy that sends me the same picture over and over and over again for years. And I'm saying, hey man, we all quit sending me that stuff, and that's when you recognize it. The people that deny what we just talked about is the problem, and those are the ones that they're targeting because that's the masses of the population.
Right. And that's why we here at World Ascension aim to be so much different, to not give in. I mean, so many people told us, we've only been doing this for a month or so, and so many people told us, you need to get in another line of work because literally for 2 weeks our conferences and interviews went bust. They're like, I think you're being targeted. I said, well, albeit we're not going to give up, and we're protected, we're okay.
Right.
We're not going to feed, and that's why on our website we say, please do your own research. Yeah,
well, let me go a little personal here. I also was on a show with Andy and Laura Eisenhower, and I studied her. It was her show live with the L&M radio network when I was just researching, and she said something that, oh, wow, that's what I recognized from 40 years ago. So we started becoming friends on Facebook, and we chatted once on Skype. I helped her put together a presentation, and she loved it. But since that time, and haven't run across yet with all this information. And I've recognized she is a highly targeted individual, and she tries to explain it away on her website. I'm not trying to cut her down. I love the girl with everything. I mean, her great-grandfather was the reason we won the war. But
right, Dwight Eisenhower.
Having said that, I've been trying to reach out to her to listen to this stuff, and she's doing her own thing, which is not bad.
But and Laura's very busy right now. I know her very personally, and we all go through these things. She's just swamped with work, So,
all right, we're going to continue. Ready?
Yeah.
People are just telling each other lies because they'd rather not admit to the unpleasant truths. When I first came onto this scene and started my own conference calls in late 2009, it didn't take me long to figure out that TIs weren't being 100% truthful about targeting. And if you take everything TIs say at face value, you're going to come to some conclusions that are not true. I guess people are always telling lies to protect themselves or their egos. But when you get a bunch of people telling each other lies and accepting each other's lies as truth, you've got a problem. A culture of disinformation. Another kind of lie that gets told by TIs is the noble lie. Exaggerating events, overlooking weaknesses in testimony to advance a noble cause. I have a personal anecdote where I encountered a noble lie. About 10 years ago, when I was at a school, and I attended a women's studies lecture about the prevalence of rape on college campuses. And the professor who was speaking at that lecture, a PhD in women's studies or something like that, she repeated a factoid that had been debunked. It was 28% of women in college, or some ridiculously high number, I think it was 28%, have been raped at least once during their stay in college. And I knew this fact was wrong. It was based on an exaggeration of the truth. Rape does happen on college campuses, but that factoid was based on redefining many kinds of unwanted sexual contact as rape. To make a long story short, I confronted her in her office about this. I said, that study has been debunked. And she said, it doesn't matter whether it's true or not. What matters is that it gets people focused on an important issue. I will never forget that. This professor.
Having said that too, what he just said, and if you look at the news about, it goes all the way back to the Catholic Church and the boys being, pedophiles and then all this and that and the other. I mean, it's such a huge network of disinformation that they make it real, and then it becomes a real problem because they do find evidence, and then it becomes out of control.
Well, it's like a manifestation of your own reality, and I too can say that I am a highly targeted. I'm a TI myself.
We all
and but I have learned how to balance and shift, and I'm not perfect at it yet, but I know I know who's there and in my life and trying to be there for the right or wrong reasons, and I know whose voice to distinguish, and I can literally remote view, see what's going on with one of my dear friends, and we will talk about that later, Ben, via phone. I've got some interesting stuff to share with you to put some protection and something around this person.
Okay. Was telling this lie knowingly to advance an agenda. And preventing rape is a worthwhile agenda, but nevertheless, she was telling a lie. And people do pick up on that. They see through that. This tactic, telling a lie to advance an issue, really only works when people aren't paying attention. Since everything about advocacy involves getting people to pay attention, this is a self-defeating tactic. And unfortunately, I see this in some TI advocacy. Even simple word association games, in articles where anyone who has a position the author likes states things, makes a statement, and anyone who has a position the author doesn't like makes claims. These word games, which are completely obvious and transparent to outsiders, don't fool most adults. They're going to see right through that. They're going to view you as a propagandist. They're going to ignore everything else you're saying. They're going to dismiss the truth because they see the obvious lies.
I saw you pointing your finger there, and I had the same almost thought. That happened to me on the male side in my past, and it was about the industrial espionage about Skype. And lies were told, and I fell down for that. And I know exactly what he's talking about because it presented such a huge problem that I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know how to accept that. Okay, we're going to continue.
And that ends up hurting your cause. Another kind of untruth that TI spread around is rooted in scientific or economic misconceptions. One of those is implantless mind control. The idea that people can be controlled remotely without any kind of implant on their person. And who knows where this is coming from? A satellite, cell towers, whatever. HAARP arrays, that's a favorite. And that's been spread around, and there are a couple of authority figures who have said, yeah, we can't find any implants. And Eleanor White has said on her website, modern methods don't require implants. And Dr. Nick Begich has said, look at all this evidence we have suggesting that, in fact, this is indeed happening. But when you look into that, when you dig deep down to the bottom of the sources that these people are using to come to these conclusions, there's really nothing there. It's just kind of wishful thinking. They decided what they wanted to find, and then they went looking for evidence. And that's an example of confirmation bias. Whatever you're looking for, if you're looking for evidence hard enough, you are going to find it, no matter what you're looking for. I've been confronted with documents from TIs many times where there's this 50-page document and there's a couple of sentences somewhere in the middle, and they mention investigations or sneak and peek or something like that. And you see, that just proves they're being gang-stalked. Confirmation bias is a major issue for TIs, because not only is this a bad research method, but even if you're a good researcher, this has blindsided a lot of TIs, including myself. The handlers of a TI are in a unique position to confirm the TI's biases. They observe whatever the target talks about, whatever the TI believes, and then provides them with evidence suggesting that these things really are true. And I saw that a couple of years ago on the Gang Stalking World guy's personal site. He was talking about Stasi hand signals. He'd seen people using hand signals around him, and of course he complained about them on his site, and the next day he'd get more hand signals. See? That just proves it. They're using hand signals to coordinate.
Right.
This is a good point where I can get into some specific examples building on Gang Stalking World. From the beginning, when I became aware of that person's site, it seemed suspicious. It looked like he was being overly cheerful, and the site was just a little too well designed. That was the way I saw it at the time. Just a little too professional, just a little too cheery. I didn't really take it seriously, but he seemed to be on my side, so I didn't go after his site. Anyway, that guy has been promoting manpower-intensive explanations of what TIs are going through. Originally going with this idea of Stasi, parallels to COINTELPRO, and so on. But about a year ago, he switched gears. Suddenly he was talking about threat assessment teams at OSHA, Occupational Hazard and Safety Administration. I was just looking at this when I found out about his change in focus and wondering, what on earth is this guy talking about? Why is he suddenly obsessed with OSHA? When I dug into his research, I found he'd fixated on this one phrase for reasons I didn't understand at the time. Threat assessment team. He'd clearly been looking for any documentation on the web that mentioned this phrase, in an effort to prove that this was the one true explanation. Again, this is confirmation bias. If you look for something hard enough, you will find it. He found it. OSHA. OSHA is responsible for gang stalking. That was...
You know, and having said that, what he just said is so prevalent on Facebook and YouTube.
Right, yes.
And it is to confuse the masses to the point. Now think of this. If this supercomputer he's talking about later on is the artificial intelligence that they've had for like 50 years or longer, then what it's doing is it's deciphering each and every individual human on the planet. So by the time it gets smart enough, not like Skynet, and go kill us all, that's not the whole point.
Right.
It's the people that invented this stuff and control this stuff, and they're pushing the buttons. That's it.
Precisely, yeah. I mean, Ben, I could not. Honestly, I couldn't agree more. I totally understand exactly,
Well, let me give you a personal prime example. Every time I talk about this, I've been on, some of the major WDNG or whatever, Jimmy Church and all these guys, and they're all MUFON connected. The first time I ever talked about my experience in the military about the UFO abduction and all was with MUFON South Florida. They recorded a 40-minute interview, and then they asked me a question. During conception, did you ever notice any aftermath? And I looked at Kathy. What? Excuse me? Oh, not to worry, Mr. Davis. We've been studying cases like yours for over 50 years. This was in 99 now. And we recorded, documented over 28,000 cases of alien visitations and implanting an embryo. And that's what they said my daughter was. I said, this interview's over, and I got up and left.
Yeah, I was going to say that earlier when we were speaking, that I think that there are a lot of energetic conceptions happening right now. I think there's a lot more than just the Virgin, Jesus birth. I'm just going to only go ahead and say that because I have a dear friend who, he and his wife love each other to death, and they were not being sexually active for 3 months, and boom, pregnant. They didn't cheat on each other. I know them personally, both of them.
Remember what I talked about earlier about my radiation from the x-rays? And
right.
I had early puberty, and I tried for 40 years before I had my daughter. And then finally, it happened. So let's continue.
Yeah.
His story. But I still didn't understand why he had come up with that explanation. Well, that guy behind Gang Stalking World also has a personal blog and goes out on the web to promote his site. There's nothing wrong with that. I've done that. Anyone who's got a site about an important issue or an issue they consider important, they're going to promote that site any way they can. But I encountered him on a psychology forum on the internet, and I finally said in November of last year, dude, you've been played. You've been led down the primrose path by con artists with access to mind control technology.
The handlers.
And I explained why.
The handlers, yes.
I never heard from him again. Less than a month later, he stopped updating his site. Since November, all the updates on his site and on his personal blog have all been about mind control, synthetic telepathy, mind reading. The impression I get is they dropped the hammer on him. They let him know, this is how it really works. You've been writing about a lie for years. I found out where he got his threat assessment team terminology a few days ago. I finally poured through Nick Begich's book on mind control. It mentions threat assessment teams, briefly, in a paragraph-long blurb towards the end. It kind of suggests that this is how targets might be selected. A threat is assessed, and then the team goes after him. So that's where he got this phrase. This guy, the Gang Stalking World guy, was obsessed with mind control several months ago, or even a year ago. And he was trying to merge his gang stalking thesis with mind control. And that's how he came up with threat assessment teams and OSHA. This seems like a pretty good explanation for why he stopped posting updates, too. Learning that everything you know is wrong can be quite a shock. I think the Gang Stalking World saga is a good cautionary tale. There needs to be not only research, but meta-research. The meta-research needs to come up with the answer, why is this person interested in certain topics? That can help us unravel the truth behind stories that don't seem to make sense. Another example of disinformation is this idea of advanced perp technology. This phrase sounds ridiculous, but perp technology is a concept that's floating around. I think even Eleanor White's website uses that phrase. What Eleanor White is saying is that she's a professional engineer, so you should trust her judgment. And she's performed experiments with these instruments she has. A seismograph, a dosimeter, the whole 9 yards. She's got this idea that she's experimenting on them and finding out how their tricks work. But I don't really see it that way. I think what she doesn't understand is she's not experimenting on them. They're experimenting on her.
Exactly. I mean, really. Now here we go with the samples I sent you, right? Those are factual. That's not made up. It's not where I got led to. It's information.
Exactly, yeah.
It's information and research that, like he said, you have to dig it up, and 98.5% of it out there is nonsense. And when my wife saw her live sample under a 2,000 power microscope I got sitting right there with photo, capture capability software, and she backed up away from that thing, she says, I'm going to go vomit. And she ran to the bathroom and threw up.
Yeah.
And she's a non-believer, so here we go.
What can we get Eleanor White to believe? That's the experiment. For example, the vibratory attack, which I've written about, and she's come to my website to attack my interpretation of it. I'm saying it's mostly neurotechnology. To debunk me, she cited a series of experiments she did where she determined, no, this stuff really sets off a seismograph. And the water in a glass on the table is vibrating, and she's not touching it. So it doesn't have anything to do with neurotechnology. But this experiment wasn't really controlled by her. It was controlled by them. And she might not even have designed the experiment of her own free will. I don't think she's come to terms with the notion that she might have been moved around like a puppet without even realizing it. Putting myself in the handler's shoes, let's say I wanted to convince someone of the existence of this advanced technology that can make objects vibrate at a distance, with no line of sight, right through the walls and everything. And I had access to the target's mind through the use of neurotechnology. I might do something like this. I'm not saying this is what's being done to Eleanor White. I'm saying this is one trick they could use. So, she put the glass of water down on her desk and observed it vibrating. What I would do in their position is I would get a workman to drill a hole in the desk beforehand, and I'd put the guts of a pager or cell phone inside that hole. I'd have a carpenter fill the hole up. Someone who can do a good enough job to fool an engineer. I'm sure that would be pretty easy to do. Aside from the neurotechnology, there's nothing exotic about this. All the skills and materials are easy to come by. So she comes up with this idea, or she thinks it's her idea. Let's place a glass of water on the desk and see if it vibrates when my body isn't in contact with it. So they move her arm to place the glass of water in exactly the right spot. She isn't aware of this. I've already gone over this on my site. It's been known for decades that evoked actions, people just rationalize them away. She thinks it's all her ideas and her actions. She observes the water vibrating, and the reason it's vibrating is because they called the pager or cell phone. She doesn't know any of this is going on behind the scenes. All she knows is what she sees, and she thinks she's gotten a glimpse into their technology. She might even measure it with a seismograph and confirm it's really happening.
A magic trick.
So that's how they could have planted disinformation in her head. No new physics, just neurotechnology and psychological operations. But she isn't allowing for the possibility that she's been deceived, and that's a problem.
With the targeted individuals, etc.,
right,
and these neurotechnologies, let's just lay the playing field for you guys, for the listeners and viewers. These neurotechnologies are being sprayed via chemtrails. They can get into you through all kinds of things, shots, inoculations. So be careful. Listen to what Ben has to say, and John Smith coming up.
Let me just read a paragraph that kind of got scrambled yesterday. Every thought, reaction, hearing, and visual observation causes a certain neurological potential spikes and patterns in the brain and its electromagnetic fields, which can now be decoded into thoughts, pictures, and voices. Electromagnetic stimulation can therefore change a person's brain waves and affect muscular activity, causing painful muscular cramps experienced as torture. And the NSA's electronic surveillance system can simultaneously follow and handle millions of people. That was in 1999. And each of us has a unique bioelectrical resonance frequency in the brain, just as we have unique fingerprints. With electromagnetic frequency, the EMF, brain stimulation fully coded, pulsating electromagnetic signals can be sent to the brain, causing the desired voice and visual effects to be experienced by the target. This is a form of electronic warfare. U.S. astronauts and all that, they had it done in the Gemini programs. So they've had this for a very long time.
Oh yeah, and I think that's how Max Spears, our recent friend that I was supposed to interview this week, I think that's how he was taken out this past week.
You know, see, that's what I said earlier. That's the Rambo chip, super soldier.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we're done for the day, and we got to get all of this out because it's very imperative that the whole world wakes up. That they all been saying that, but who's really going to listen? I am.
Well, you know, exactly. I think, honey, I just had someone send a text saying, like, when is it going to be up? You know, so they're excited. We're going to get this out there. We had your wonderful interview yesterday. We've had 2 this morning that we were going to pump these out there to people for free because that's what we do. Even though we need the money, it would be great if you could go, you know, donate via World Ascension Conference, www.worldascensionconference.com. If you'd like to donate and help out, it goes to our speakers and everything. Since we're a nonprofit community, everything comes out of our pocket. And we wouldn't have it any other way because we freaking love you guys. We really do. So much. This is why we're here, coming at you live with unconditional love and just with our life's mission, giving you the tools provided with enlightenment, ascension, esoteric knowledge, the hidden truth, hidden secrets, secret government ops, etc. Mars, secret space program, the list goes on, you name it. Thank you guys for being here. Tune in. Keep looking out for the next video. Thank you so much. Lots of loves, lots of blessings from Ben and I, and yours truly, World Ascension Conference co-founders Laura Eisenhower, Dolly Indigo Star Deeming, and myself, Lindsey Elocin Hooper.